Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on Clubhouse every Thursday and share it as the Madlik podcast on your favorite platform. This week's Parsha is Noah. We will review the traditions where Noah gets a bad rap and has been denigrated for saving only himself and his family and for not saving all of humanity. In a world where victims and survivors of terrorism are vilified and protecting one's life and the security of one's family made into a sin, we look at Noah differently. Maybe we can learn something about ourselves and our enemies. So join us for Tzaddik in Peltz. So I need to explain what a tzaddik in Peltz is, but before, Rabbi, it's typical of a podcast or anything else that if you have a negiah b'davar, if you have a horse in the race, you need to come clean. So I do need to come clean. Noah is my bar mitzvah parsha. So
Mazel tov.
So if I defend Noah a little bit tonight, you will excuse me. But Tzaddik in Peltz, you will find out during the course of this podcast. It is Yiddish, and it means a tzaddik who wears a fur coat. And I will get to it in a second, but I want to get there historically. So I want to start with the texts and the commentaries that created the possibility of talking about Noah in, as I said in the intro, in a diminished, maybe derogatory way. So in Genesis 6:9, it says, Ele toldot Noah, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Ish tzadik tamim haya bedorotav. Noah walked with God. Et ha'elokim hithalech Noach. So, on the face of it, everything is good. He was blameless, and he walked with God. But there's this little thing about Bidorotav, in his generation, which, again, unless you need to make a commentary, I think could be left alone. But Rashi says Bidorotav, in his generations. Some of our rabbis explain it to his credit. He was righteous even in his generation. It follows that had he lived in a generation of righteous people, he would have been even more righteous owing to the force of good example. Here's a guy who was surrounded by bad people and he was still righteous. Forget about peer pressure. He excelled. So that's the argument for saying that Bedorotav makes Noah the exemplar of a great tzaddik. Others, however, continues Rashi, explain it is to his discredit. In comparison with his own generation, he was accounted righteous. But had he lived in the generation of Abraham, he would have been accounted as of no importance. Nichshav leklum. Walked with God. So Rashi isn't finished. In the case of Abraham, Scripture says, before whom I walked God, that Abraham walked in front of God. Noah needed God's support to uphold him in righteousness. Abraham drew his moral strength from himself and walked in his righteousness by his own efforts. So Rabbi, whether on the basis of the verse itself or on the life of Noah, what is going on here? Why are we trying to discredit the namesake of our parsha?
So that is so interesting. And that is such a good question. Why don't you just let it go? Why don't you just let Noach be a tzaddik? That's really the question, right? And what's the answer? Is Abraham called a tzaddik? Is Moshe called a tzaddik? Only Noach is called a tzaddik. And I think that there's this feeling like, why should Noach be better than everybody else?
So you think that it's the old adage of speaking praise in front of somebody that, one of the things that the Chofetz Chaim used to say, because the Chofetz Chaim was really into this Lashon Hara, and he would say, don't praise somebody, because if you praise somebody, somebody's going to say something bad about him. So that's where you see it. It's like...
Yeah, something like that, right? Means that you have to wonder, right, that they make Noach so good. What does it say about everybody else?
So the first thing that I need to say is that it is Rashi's innovation to compare Noah to Abraham. If you look
correct.
at the Gemara in Sanhedrin, it does not compare him to Abraham. It says to other generations. And by the way, it goes on to talk about other parables, other metaphors for what it's talking about. It's a barrel of wine was placed in a cellar of vinegar. It smelled good compared to the vinegar. You took it out of the cellar of vinegar. Maybe it wasn't a Chateau Lafite Rothschild. Maybe it wasn't as good. It's a flask of perfume that was placed amongst filth. And even there, it shined. So the rabbis use other metaphors, but what I would like to say that what everybody seems to agree on is that Noah was contextually a tzaddik. Noah was definitely a person, a figure of his time, and what everybody agrees upon was for his time, for that moment, he was a tzaddik. And that becomes kind of interesting as we evaluate the time. But it does I agree with you totally that, why he got a bad rap, unless it is to teach us some of the lessons that maybe we will discuss tonight, which is that righteousness is not grown in a petri dish. It's not grown out of context. And Noah, by all the commentaries, was a tzaddik in his generation. Maybe that's what they're focused on.
Maybe. I think that's good. I mean, everything you're saying is right. And your question is really on Rashi. Why does Rashi need to invent this? Usually, see, that's an interesting historical point. Usually Rashi reflects earlier traditions. When Rashi makes something up, it needs to be analyzed.
So what Rashi makes up is the comparison to Abraham. That is not in the Midrashic material. And Clearly what he is comparing to Abraham is Abraham, talk about context, and Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham is presented with God's judgment that he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And he says, if there are 50 people, save them. And there aren't 50 people. And make a long story short, because we're in Parshat Noach, we're not talking about Abraham tonight. He says, if there are 10, let them be saved. And there aren't 10. And at the end of the day, who does he save? He saves his family. Why is he any better than Noah, who saves his family? But Abraham seems to vocalize, seems to represent this universal sense of judgment where you turn to God and you say, you, creator of all things, you, the judge of all judges, how could you condemn a city where there are some innocent people? But I think that the comparison with Abraham actually puts our focus on, laser real, that now we are talking about two people, Noah and Abraham, who ultimately end up saving just their family. But they come at it from a different perspective. And that's how I would like to couch it tonight. And you're right, it is Rashi. It is Rashi who makes the comparison to Abraham. And that becomes fascinating because Noah is the father of mankind. When we talk about the laws of humanity, it is the Shiva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 commandments of most basic commandments of the children of Noah. We all are the children of Adam, but because only Noah survived the flood, we are also the children of Noah. And unlike Adam, who was created by God, Noah was created by a decision he made and by his character. Am I coming out too strong for Noah?
No, you're. This is where I'm listening. I'm listening.
Okay, so the name of the podcast is A Tzaddik in Peltz. We all know what a tzaddik is. A tzaddik is a righteous person. Peltz is a Yiddish word for a fur coat. And according to most of the sources that I found on the internet, this is attributed to the Kotzker Rebbe. I would have attributed it to the Maggid of Dubno, but if everybody says the Kotzker Rebbe, I'll go with the Kotzker Rebbe. And he says, when it is winter and it's freezing cold, there are 2 things one can do. One can build a fire, one can wrap oneself in a fur coat. In both cases, the person is warm. But when builds a fire, all who gather round will also be warmed. With the fur coat, the only one who is warmed is the one who wears the coat. So it is regarding spiritual warmth. One can be a tzaddik in a fur coat. So basically, the argument of the tzaddik in Peltz is that we all have a choice. We can save ourselves or we can save the world. And Noah is an example of someone who saved himself and his family. And if you take Rashi and Abraham is someone who universalized it. So I think it's a fascinating. The Kotzker Rebbe is obviously someone who is much not contemporary, but within the last 300 years. I have in the source sheet, which is attached to this podcast, Rabbi Riskin, who quotes again 2 different opinions along the same lines. He quotes Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Poloni, who says, Noah walked only and exclusively with God, tragically neglecting the wayward individuals all around him. Noah missed the opportunity of bringing God to humanity. On the other hand, he quotes the Ketav Sofer, and we have quoted the Sofers before because they were extremely against the Haskalah, the modernism, and they argued that Noah was absolutely correct in maintaining the wall between himself and the world. After all, Noah had good reason to fear that if he went outside to battle the prevailing winds, his own children might be tossed to the edges. So it's the old question, do I worry about me and my own, or do I try to fight the world and potentially lose it all? Riskin is talking about spiritual Jewish things. We tonight are talking about an approach to who we are as Jews, who we are as Israelis in terms of defending ourselves. It could not be a more timely question to ask. Noah as someone who looks out for his own, or someone else, maybe an Abraham. I'm not sure Abraham deserves that to
right,
carry
that's
this
next
load.
Week's topic.
That's next week's topic. But the other side, the universal.
Agreed. Okay, this is a really good topic. I mean, the personal against the universal is such an important issue that we're all talking about now.
To put it in context, in Genesis 6:11 on our parsha, it says, "The earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with lawlessness." So my Machatonim, Phil, pointed out that the word for lawlessness is Hamas, and Hamas means totally violent, wrong, cruelty, injustice. But ultimately, what the Torah says is that the world was totally corrupt. And when God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh had corrupted in ways on earth, God said to Noah, "I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness. Because of them, I am about to destroy them." I want to quote a fascinating post in the Times of Israel by David Horowitz, who is the editor, the founder of the Times of Israel. And, the Minister of Defense Gallant has been quoted as saying that the Palestinians or Hamas are like animals. And I don't want to go there in terms of characterizing people. What I want to go is in terms of military planning. And what Horowitz says is fascinating. And he says you are all going after the war to look at the mistakes of the military, at the mistakes of intelligence. He said, but there was a belief inside the IDF that Hamas' increasing professionalism would one day mean a harder struggle for the army, not that the terror group's improved killing skills would continue to be primarily directed against civilians. And in the Sephira notes, you can look at the whole article. But what he's basically saying is, in terms of us reading the fig leaves, we were saying, look, we're letting more workers into Israel. We're employing more Gazans. They're firing less rockets. They are like us. And from a military intelligence planning point of view, we should have realized that the earth was full of Hamas, that they are totally evil, that nothing that they do can be interpreted for good. And that was an intelligence failure. And so again, without getting into talking about who people are and what they're capable of and all that, from an intelligence point of view, we misread the situation, and we should have read Parshat Noach, and we should have realized that Hamas is incapable of any good. They are evil. And sometimes, and you can attribute this to God, or you can attribute it to Noah, but ultimately, Noah realized that they were incapable of any good. And that is the first lesson that we need to learn for Parshat Noach.
That's a very important lesson. I mean, first of all, just to clarify, it is interesting that the word Hamas and Hamas are the same thing. The truth is that Hamas, the terrorist group, is actually an abbreviation for some Arabic something or other, like PLO stands for whatever it stands for. But it can't be by chance that we're reading Noach this week, and it can't be by chance that the word Hamas appears in Noach. Can't be, right?
There were never any coincidences.
That's correct.
Okay, so now I want to go down a thread in Judaism, and I am going to paint a picture of what Noah tacked into and where he is coming from. So the first thing is, it's called Chayecha Kodem, your life comes first. In Baba Metzia, we have this story of two people. There's a verse in Leviticus that said, "And your brother shall live with you." And the question rises, what happens if two people are in the desert? and they only have enough water for one to survive. So there is the position that Ben Petora taught, it's preferable that both of them drink and die. Let neither one of them see the death of the other. This will be accepted until Rabbi Akiva came along and said, your brother shall live with you, indicating that your life take precedence over the life of other. So last week we talked about Ubacharta B'Chaim, about Judaism's great belief in life. Now we're getting down into the weeds. And Rabbi Akiva, whose opinion I believe is accepted, is saying Chayecha Kodem, that in a zero-sum game, you have to worry about your life. And I think that is the first thread that I would like to say that Noah was plugged into, that his life came first. And if you look at those arguments between how do you deal with outreach or inreach, in the sense of living, in the tense sense of survival, Jewish tradition says, Chayecha Kodem, your life come first. It's a powerful statement, and it's an ethical statement. And there are great philosophies that we are going to maybe touch upon, but I think we believe strongly in that. And I think it comes across in Noah, and it comes across today.
I'll just make a little point. It's interesting that there's another opinion, right? I mean, you would think, of course, you have to take care of yourself. No, there's another opinion that says that you should die to share the water.
I love that. I love that.
Right? I mean, that's to me, this has always been true. I think the other opinion is more interesting. It's not the right opinion. And of course, you have to, Chayecha Kodem. But it's so interesting that someone actually takes the other opinion.
Again, I love what you're saying, and I love it from the perspective that it shows how thoughtful, I wouldn't say radical, but I would say how thoughtful Rabbi Akiva's opinion is. That there are other alternatives. But
there is a theory that opinion of Ben Petura, they should both die, that's Christianity. Right? The idea you have to always take care of the other one, even at your own expense. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, that's not what we believe. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's interesting.
We could dedicate a whole evening to
We sure could. That's what we
Talmud.
said at the beginning, is that we could keep some of these discussions going for longer than a week.
But we're going to continue. So in
Yes.
Sanhedrin 73a, the sages taught that from where is it derived with regard to one who pursues another? This is called the Chok HaRodef, the pursuer. That if someone is running by you, that you have the right, without a court, without jurisdiction, to save your life and to kill the pursuer. And it says, the verse states, you shall not stand idly by the blood of another. And from this, they learned that you have to obviously save yourself. And I have to say, and we're not going to spend any time on this either, that the many of the defenses for abortion, where either the mother's life is at risk physically, or psychologically, or economically, the justification is the Chok HaRodef, which means if your life is going to be destroyed, your life comes first. But today, we're focused on Noah. And in Noah is a case, I believe that Jewish tradition again bears him out in the sense that when you have to make a choice between your life and the life of your family, and those that are pursuing you, the answer is Chayecha Kodem. The answer is that you have the right to strike back on he or she who wants to kill you.
Yes, that's all I can say is I think that's 100% right. Okay, next.
So these are all issues that I've quoted till now of capital offenses, of killing somebody. But now I want to bring multiple cases where Judaism really has a strong emphasis on the family relationship, on who it is that you are. And I'm going to go through them quickly. So the first is about lending money. In Exodus 22:24, it says, when you lend money, or that you should lend money to the poor among you, there is this sense that when it comes to tzedakah, there's an English expression, charity begins at home. Charity begins at home. So that is what the verse in Exodus says. In Deuteronomy it says, you shall not deduct interest from loans to your fellow Israelites, whether in money or food or anything. You may deduct interest from loans to foreigners. This was used by non-Jews to criticize, to persecute Jews, that we did not charge interest to ourselves, but we were money lenders to the nation. But at the end of the day, as Rashi explains, if you have to choose between lending money to my people and a non-Jew, my people come first. If between a poor man and one who is better off, the poor man comes first. If between thine own poor relatives and the other poor of the city next door, think of your own poor first. If between the poor of thine own city and the poor of another city, the point is made. What Rashi and Jewish tradition takes from this is that we do have a moral, ethical obligation to ourselves, to those who are close to us. And I think it is a profound, profound message that we are going to explore further, because it doesn't stop there. You know, there are many of us, Rabbi, who don't have meat and milk together. But I would actually put this law within the same group of laws that I'm talking about. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. I see that as recognition of the special filial relationship of a family, of a mother to a child. It says in Leviticus 22, no animal from the herd or from the flock shall be slaughtered on the same day with its young. There was this ethical need to say you can't slaughter a mother cow and its child cow in the same day, because that would draw a spear into the sense of a filial relationship and the ethics of Judaism that recognize that filial relationship. And I would even go so far, Rabbi, as to say that the fifth of the 10 Commandments, which the first 4 are all about God, the Sabbath, idols, and all that. And then all of a sudden it says, honor your father and mother. And then the other 5 are all between man and man, ben adam lechavero. But I would argue that there is a very strong thread in Judaism that puts focus on the basic values of ethics, that if we can't love ourselves, and we said last week, the world is created for me, and if we can't love our family and our people, then our love is meaningless. And that's the lesson I take from all of these laws. I forgot to mention the law of Kansipur, where you can't take a mother away from the nest of her. There is such sensitivity to that relationship. And I think, in a sense, we have to give honor to that tzaddik in Pels, through that Noah, who honored the fact that he wanted to retain what he had, his family, his tribe.
I think that's it's beautiful in terms of Noach. Happy birthday, happy bar mitzvah. And I think it really speaks to us this week. I think, in Israel, whenever you see somebody, you end the conversation, now you say Besorot Tovot, that we should share good news. So please God, we should share Besorot Tovot. Next week, we should have better news. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Thank you, Jeffrey. And please God, we should all hear better things in the state of Israel.
So thank you, Rabbi. I have more notes than I need, and I'm going to read a few quotes because I think this is bigger than just scripture. And so what I'm going to read now is from Dostoevsky in The Brothers Karamazov. And he talks about loving humanity in the abstract. And I think that is the biggest challenge that we are up against, especially our children are up against. So I'm going to read that and one commentary on it, and then I will sign off. So here's what Dostoevsky writes. The more I love humanity in general, the less I love man in particular. In my dreams, I often make plans for the service of humanity, and perhaps I might actually face crucifixion if they were suddenly necessary. Yet I am incapable of living in the same room with anyone for 2 days together. I know from experience, as soon as anyone is near me, his personality disturbs me and restricts my freedom. In 24 hours, I begin to hate the best of men. One because he's too long over his dinner, another because he has a cold and keeps on blowing his nose. I become hostile to people the moment they come too close to me, but it has always happened that the more I hate men individually, the more I love humanity. And I will argue that the opposite of Noah today, the opposite of a man or woman who cares about their family or cares about their people against ultimate evil, Hamas, is those who love humanity in the abstract. And Dostoevsky says it so well. But I want to quote a little bit from an amazing post on January of this year that is titled When Misanthropes Love Humanity. And she writes, her name is Megan Kohler. She happens to be a Mormon. She writes, when loving humanity becomes a pretense for dehumanizing individuals, we are no longer fighting evil, we are becoming it. The abstraction called humanity makes few real demands of us. Individual human beings, by contrast, will try out our patience relentlessly. Left unchecked, social and political activism can create the kinds of ideological purity tests that serve to further isolate and divide. The danger in using one's commitment to social or political cause as a barometer for tolerance, love, mercy, or justness is that such commitments rarely require the selflessness that defines these virtues. This is especially true in the age of social media. As a friend has written, grandstanding on social media does not make you a good person. But there's a real risk it can make you uncivil, intransigent, and insincere. When every post or exchange takes place before an audience, there are strong incentives to perform. The nature of online activism makes it easy to lose track of whether you are serving a cause or serving your ego. I think that Noah becomes a paradigm of someone who is clear about what it means to stand for yourself and your family in the presence of real evil. I think that real evil has to be called out, and in the case of Hamas, it needs to be called out. And for our children and the younger generation who are abused on campuses, abused on social media, that people engaged in what I call cheap grace feel that somehow they have the ethical high road by liking a post that says Palestine free, or from the sea to the land. Whatever they say, they are not only misinformed and ignorant, but at the end of the day, they are on the side of evil. And so I think that today, Noah becomes a paradigm for us to follow of someone who realizes the reality of the situation. And in the reality, Tzaddik B'doro understands what the right thing to do. And those of us who are supporting Israel, and those of us who are listening to this podcast when Joe Biden, our president, is making a speech, I hope we will all go to YouTube to listen to him. But here is a leader, a sage, someone who feels reality, ethics, and the sympathy for those who are injured, hurt, maimed, and bereaved, and is standing on the side of right. We should all listen to him and take his guidance and listen to our elders and all be, tonight, B'nai Noach. Shabbat Shalom. See you all next week.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Shabbat Shalom.
Miriam, how are you?
I just really want to thank you for your words and what you said. And it's so important to remember that, yes, we have to take care of ourselves, but also we need to do it in a framework of maintaining our own responsibility. And I actually heard President speech, and he was talking about how important is to the unity, the sense that we have two ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and in Israel right now, that we need to support both as United States of America, and how important unity is, and how important it is to stay restrained. And I think that this is the balance that is so difficult to catch, so difficult to know exactly how much is enough, is just enough, and not too much. And that I'm praying for Israel, and I'm praying for, and that's not words of president, but I just send my prayers to politicians around the world, and especially in Israel, to know exactly how to do this very difficult decision of how to navigate this extremely difficult and complex political scenery that is unrolling in front of us, despite the pain and heartbrokenness that we feel, and how to do it with both Torah and Hashem in our hearts. It's not easy.
I couldn't agree more, and I think the key word here in our Pasha is B'Torotav, in your generation, in your time. And, at the end of the day, Noah does what he needs to do, and then he builds a vineyard, and then he gets drunk. Because there are no easy decisions. Because there's no right and wrong. Because he did what he had to do. But it's not black and white. And he felt it. There's a deep emotional response in him. But ultimately, he knew at the end of the day that the most important thing was to survive. And so that's what we have. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And let's all have strength, and let's all support our brothers and sisters in Israel as they survive, and they will survive.
Amen. It's so important. And thank you for it. It's so important to find now the right words. It's so hard to do that.
Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom, and only the best for you.